Marrying a plumber. How embarrassing. The short email from my father glowed coldly on my phone screen. Outside the window, I could faintly hear the gentle chatter of guests, but none of it reached me. I slowly closed my eyes and took a deep breath. Clutching my phone tightly, I made a quiet decision. From this day on, everything would change. The marriage they called a disgrace would be the true beginning of my new life. A soft knock came at the dressing room door, and Tiffany, my best friend and maid of honor, stepped inside. "Ashley, it's almost time." She glanced at my face, momentarily speechless, then looked toward the empty seats with a worried expression. "No one, really?" I nodded silently. The sympathy in her eyes only strengthened my resolve. I accepted the bouquet Tiffany held out to me, just as my phone vibrated again. This time, it was from my mother. "Because of you, I can't show my face in the neighborhood anymore. Couldn't you have chosen someone more respectable?" As if to drive the knife in deeper, Nicole updated her social media. A photo of her and my parents raising champagne glasses on the beach. The location tag read Maldives with hashtags family trip making memories. A family trip on my wedding day. The moment I saw that post, something inside me quietly disappeared for good. I turned to Tiffany and gave her a small smile. "I'll be fine. I can walk alone." The place where my father should have stood. The seats where my family should have been watching. All of it was empty. And into that empty space, I was about to step forward on my own. I stood alone in the grand atrium leading to the chapel, waiting for the doors to open. The music began, and a staff member placed their hands on the heavy doors. And then, "Ashley, wait." A calm but firm voice called out to me. I turned around and saw my uncle, George, standing there. His face was filled with both sorrow and unwavering determination. Uncle George. He came to stand before me and spoke softly. "I overheard the staff saying you'd be walking alone." With a gentle, slightly shy smile, he held out his arm. "If you don't mind, I'd be honored to walk with you." The moment I heard those words, warmth welled up in my eyes. I held tightly onto his offered arm. The doors opened. Supported by my uncle, I took my first step down the aisle. Then another. The empty seats in the front row caught my eye, but my heart no longer wavered. True family isn't about blood or appearances. It's about the people who simply wish for your happiness and stand beside you in moments like this. With every step toward the altar, the guests' warm applause and smiling faces wrapped around me like a gentle embrace. My gaze stayed fixed straight ahead. At the altar, Kevin's face shone with relief and a deep, unwavering love for me. By the time the reception ended and we returned home, it was past 11 p.m. Kevin gently wrapped his arm around my shoulder and stayed by my side in silence. His warmth slowly melted a part of my heart that had been frozen for so long. "Are you okay?" I nodded and met his gaze. "Yes, I'm fine. But there's something I need to take care of tonight. You can go to sleep first." He seemed to sense my determination. "All right," he said quietly. I walked alone into the study. As I powered on my computer, the bluish glow illuminated my face. On the desktop sat a single, oddly named folder. Contingency plans, family matters. Maybe, somewhere deep down, I had always known this day would come. I opened the folder. Inside was the guarantor contract for the home renovation loan, signed by my father. It was legal proof that after he defaulted on the payments, I had inherited the entire debt. Next was a credit report on Nicole. Objective data clearly showed that Nicole's excessive spending had prevented them from qualifying for a joint loan. All of this wasn't just ammunition for cutting off my financial support on a whim. It was solid legal justification for taking action against their breach of contract and betrayal. I backed up all the data to the most secure section of my cloud server and simultaneously sent an encrypted email to Matt, my law firm partner. Subject: Initiating litigation. See attached for details. Matt is the colleague I trust more than anyone. He doesn't get swayed by emotions. He simply executes his work with cold precision, according to the law. He was the perfect person to handle this case. Next, I accessed the city's property records database. Pulling up the deed for my family home, the ownership details appeared clearly on the screen. Owner of land and building, Ashley. When I took over the loan, I had, just in case, formally transferred the property title from my father to myself. My father had always been too lazy to read complicated legal documents and had simply said, "I'll leave it to you," before signing whatever I prepared. That ignorance and negligence were now tightening the noose around their necks. Calmly and making sure not to miss a single word or detail, I drafted the necessary documents. Final notice of debt fulfillment and eviction notice based on property ownership. Finally, I logged into my bank's online system. The screen displayed my list of automatic payments, utilities and internet for the family home, and the monthly living allowance I had been transferring, trusting my father's promise to work. It wasn't a lavish amount, but it was my mercy, ensuring they wouldn't end up on the streets. Without a hint of hesitation, I clicked the stop button next to each item. Click, click. The cold sound of the mouse echoed through the quiet study. When I finished everything, I leaned back deeply in my chair and exhaled a long breath. Not a single tear fell, because I could see it clearly now. The real battle was about to begin. My life had always been a series of battles. In the courtroom, my battlefield, I had constantly proven my worth. I run my own divorce law firm in New York. My job is to rebuild futures from the wreckage of my clients' broken lives. But in my family's eyes, my profession meant only one thing: failure. Ironically, I had been expected to follow the exact path they wanted for me. When I entered law school, my goal was corporate law, the only field my father ever respected. To stand at the top of Wall Street, to bring prestige to our family name. But one summer internship changed my fate entirely. The corporate law division was full, so by chance, I was assigned to family law, the department nobody wanted. And there, I discovered my true calling. In the chaos of crumbling families, in the swamp where love and hatred intertwined, I found an uncanny sense of order, a path that made sense to me. I learned to read the cold calculations hidden behind tears, to unearth legal strategies buried beneath years of resentment. It was the messiest battlefield of all. Human emotion. But instinctively, I understood something. In this field, I wouldn't just win cases. I could help rebuild futures from the rubble of shattered lives. I'll never forget the frozen stares my parents gave me when I told them I wanted to specialize in divorce law. Divorce? My mother repeated the word with disdain, as if I had announced I was joining the circus. Making a living off other people's domestic disputes? What a disgraceful job. To them, my success isn't measured by how many lives I've helped rebuild. It's measured by the value they believe I bring to the family's reputation. And yet, the failure they despised is the very one whose income has been supporting their entire lifestyle. 2 years ago, after my father retired, their finances collapsed almost immediately. Clinging to his pride from his working years, he kept his country club membership and generously treated his old friends to prove his status hadn't diminished. Meanwhile, my mother, unable to tolerate lowering their standard of living in front of the neighbors, she continued weekly shopping trips to luxury boutiques and poured money into so-called charity parties that were really just social gatherings. Their vanity inflated as if in competition with each other, and my father's retirement payout vanished in the blink of an eye. Within a year, their pension accounts were completely drained. It all began a year before my father's retirement. He had proudly declared it would be the crowning achievement of our family's legacy and planned to pay off everything in a single lump sum using his retirement bonus. But now that the bonus had evaporated, the renovation company's demand notice had arrived at their doorstep. With the foreclosure of the house now only a matter of time, my parents finally came to me in tears for the first time. After thinking for a moment, I called Nicole. "Nicole, we have a serious problem. Dad just called. He can't keep up with the mortgage, and the house might be foreclosed. I'll put in some money too, but can you help a little?" On the other end of the line, Nicole let out a derisive laugh. "Huh? Why should I? You're the big shot lawyer making all the money. You can pay for it yourself." I responded in a calm but firm tone. "Don't be irresponsible. You're part of this family and you live in that house too. The least you can do is pay half." She sighed loudly before spitting out, "You're so petty. Fine half." Her insulting tone made me grit my teeth, but at least I felt a momentary sense of relief. And so, we applied for a joint loan at the bank. My credit was flawless, but a few days later, I received a cold letter from the bank. The application had been denied. When I pressed the loan officer for an explanation, he hesitated before telling me, "There's an issue with the credit history of your co-applicant, your sister." I immediately called Nicole. When I confronted her, she replied shamelessly, "Oh, that? It's just some upfront investment to become an influencer. I took out a few loans, that's all. And everyone pays for luxury brands in installments, right?" Her credit score had long since plummeted thanks to reckless spending and piling debt. "But that's not a problem," she continued. "You've got good credit. You can get the loan on your own. Cover my share for now. Once I make it big, I'll pay you back with interest." I was speechless. In the end, to preserve the Johnson family's image, and because I couldn't bear the reality of being betrayed even by my own sister, I took on the entire massive loan by myself. After the loan paperwork was finalized, I sat down with my father at the family home. "Dad, maybe you could try working again. Even part-time. With all your experience, I'm sure there are places that could use you." He scoffed. "Don't be ridiculous. Me? Bowing my head to some young guys now? You're my daughter. It's only natural for you to take care of your parents." This time, I didn't let his arrogance slide. "It's not natural. And you need to face reality. If you don't rethink your lifestyle, you're the ones who'll be in trouble. Do you expect me to cover for you every single time?" I spread out the loan repayment schedule and a breakdown of their average monthly expenses on the table. My father glared at the documents in annoyance for a while. Eventually, he must have realized the harsh reality behind those numbers. With a heavy sigh, he finally said, all right, I'll think about it. Maybe I can work as an advisor at an old friend's company." I chose to believe him. For a moment, it felt like he was finally facing reality. Trusting that promise, I decided to support the repayment of the renovation loan. A few months later, I visited my parents' house to announce my engagement. In the heavy air of the living room, I told them that I planned to marry Kevin, The moment my father learned that Kevin was a plumber, I caught the look of contempt flash across his face. Well, I can't say I'm thrilled that he's a plumber, he said grudgingly. But if that's what you've decided, so be it. I'll walk you down the aisle. It's a father's final duty. I wanted to believe in those words, to cling to a sliver of hope. But on the day of the wedding, not a single member of my family showed up. My father, my mother, and Nicole all abandoned their promises and took off on a vacation to a distant resort. My father's words had been nothing but an empty lie. At that time, all he cared about was not losing my financial support. He was afraid of losing his leverage, using the loan payments to keep me tied to them. I quietly stood up, turned off the light in the study, and headed to the bedroom. When I gently opened the door, I saw Kevin sleeping peacefully. I slipped into bed beside him, feeling his warmth, and closed my eyes. The next morning, while I was making coffee in the kitchen, Kevin came up behind me and wrapped me in a gentle embrace. "You were working late last night," he said softly, his voice filled with quiet admiration. "You're so strong, Ashley." I turned slowly to meet his gaze. "I'm not strong. I just finally realized who I should have valued the most." The answer was in his steady, unwavering eyes. He had never cared about titles or wealth. He had always loved me for who I truly was. My family, on the other hand, saw his work clothes and labeled him simply as a plumber, deciding his worth on that alone. They could only measure people by the standards of their own shallow world. And I was the only one in the world who knew just how much they were failing to see. Yes, I knew. I knew that Kevin was actually a brilliant engineer who had graduated at the top of his class from MIT, that he had walked away from a prestigious career in the defense industry, and that he was developing a revolutionary system, infrastructure neuron, designed to fundamentally transform the future of cities. I had chosen not to tell my family the truth, because if I had, their reactions would have been entirely predictable. My father would boast about Kevin's background as if it were his own achievement. My mother would parade it around the social circuit. Nicole would start asking for money. They wouldn't see Kevin as a person. They'd swarm around his title, and I refused to let their superficial validation taint our love. 3 weeks after the wedding, I finished work early and headed home. That night, Kevin was going to be featured on national news. When I opened the living room door, he was already waiting with a bottle of champagne on ice. We sat together on the sofa and switched the TV to the business news channel. Moments later, the anchor announced excitedly, "Here's the arrival of a young genius entrepreneur, a modern-day Thomas Edison." The screen cut to Kevin, standing confidently in front of a sleek research facilities logo. The headline read, "Former defense engineer to save the city. AI infrastructure, diagnostic infrastructure neuron officially launches." As the program celebrated his success, Kevin and I exchanged a look and clinked our champagne glasses. When the segment ended and the credits rolled quietly, I turned to him. "Your vision has always been right," I said. "Whether you were in work clothes covered in dust or being praised nationwide like this, your core never changed. And that's what I'm most proud of." Kevin smiled gently. "It's because you always believed in that core, Ashley. Without the best partner by my side, this system would never have come to life." We clinked our glasses again, not for wealth or fame, but for the trust we had built together and the new future awaiting us. The next morning, my phone rang. It was my mother. "Ashley, I saw the TV segment. Why didn't you tell us? He's such a wonderful man. Honestly, you're so secretive. Your father's thrilled. He says Kevin's the perfect son-in-law for the Johnson family. We absolutely have to throw a celebration." There wasn't a single word of apology for skipping my wedding, only the shrill excitement of someone who just found a big prize. She wasn't thrilled about Kevin the person, only about Kevin, the MIT educated CEO, and the social prestige she believed it would bring to them. Their tongues hadn't even dried from calling him just a plumber and boycotting the wedding before they switched to praising him as the perfect son in law. The hypocrisy was so brazen that I simply hung up without a word. Moments later, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message from Tiffany. "Can you believe this?" Attached was a screenshot, Nicole's social media post. She had shared a photo from Kevin's feature with the caption, "Introducing my amazing brother-in-law, Kevin. #family, #CEO, #proud sister." My mother's call and Nicole's post. Their blatant about-face didn't even make me angry anymore. I was simply stunned by how transparent it was. They still hadn't realized that the ground beneath their feet was already crumbling. A few weeks later, the quiet time bomb finally went off. A stack of utility bills arrived at my parents' house. My mother snapped photos of them and sent me a message. "Ashley, these just came. It looks like the electricity and other bills haven't been paid." Her tone carried the same entitled assumption that I would, of course, fix the problem. I replied with just one sentence. "Right, I stopped the payments." Less than 5 minutes later, my father called. His voice was shaking with a mix of rage and confusion. "What the hell is this, Ashley?" "You stopped the payments." Unfazed by his shouting, I answered calmly, "Exactly what it sounds like. On the day you emailed me saying it was embarrassing to marry a plumber and skipped my wedding to go on vacation, I stopped everything. You made it clear you don't consider me family, so I stopped treating you like family. That's all there is to it." "You've got to be kidding me." "I'm not kidding. Don't rely on me anymore. Solve your own problems." On the other end of the line, my father gasped, then raised his voice as if trying to summon the last remnants of his authority. "How dare you speak to your parents like that? Restart the payments right now. That's an order." I exhaled quietly at the absurdity of his outdated command. "Sorry, but I can't follow that order. You're not my family anymore." With that, I hung up. Then I blocked my father, my mother, and Nicole one by one. Deleting their names from my contact list felt like cutting through chains that had bound me for years. A deliberate, liberating ritual. The silence that followed was surprisingly peaceful. Of course, it wasn't that I hadn't thought about what would happen to them. A part of me even hoped that this push would finally make them stand on their own 2 feet. I hoped that they'd learn to live within their means, relying on their meager pensions and facing reality at last. Deep down, however faintly, I wished for that. But that fragile hope was shattered exactly 1 month after I'd cut off contact, and in the most aggressive way possible. That afternoon, the door to my law office burst open without an appointment. Standing there, faces twisted with anger and desperation, were my father and mother. The moment we sat down in the conference room, my father slammed a large envelope onto the table. It was the eviction notice I'd had Matt prepare. It clearly stated, in precise legal language, that I was the legal owner of the house, and that the occupants were required to vacate within 30 days. "Ashley, how dare you do something like this to your own family?" I met his eyes squarely and spoke, calm and decisive. "Because we're not family anymore. From now on, we're creditor and debtor." As if on cue, Matt, seated beside me, spoke in a measured professional tone. "The house legally belongs to Ashley. If you don't vacate within 30 days, we'll proceed with enforcement. If you have any objections, you're welcome to take it to court. For a moment, my parents froze. Then my mother snapped out of it and shrieked, "You heartless girl! How could you throw your own mother, the woman who gave birth to you, out of the house? This is how you repay me?" My father, scraping together the last fragments of his pride, shouted next, "This document means nothing. The world won't stand for this. Are you trying to drag the Johnson name through the mud?" I met their desperate resistance with a cold, unwavering gaze. First, I turned to my hysterical mother. "Repay you? Do you have any idea how much I've supported your lifestyle all these years? How much I've sacrificed just to keep up your appearances?" My quiet but piercing words left her speechless. Unfazed, I continued, "And yet you called the man I love the embarrassing just because he's a plumber? You trampled all over the most important day of my life without a second thought. You cared only about appearances, never about my happiness. Is that what a mother does? For me, in that moment, you stopped being my mother. So stop using that title as a shield." Then I turned my gaze to my father, who was still putting on a show of defiance. "The Johnson name? What does that even mean? What you're trying to protect isn't honor, it's your vanity." My words struck home, his face twisted with rage, but I didn't flinch. I delivered the final blow. "I'm simply following the law and asking you to return what you owe me. If you don't like it, then take me to court. The choice is yours." I saw the blood drain from their faces as they finally understood the reality, the irreversible consequences of their actions under the law. In the end, my parents gave up on going to court and left the house before the eviction order was enforced. Their lawyer must have told them they didn't stand a chance. The Johnson family name quietly, completely disappeared from social circles. I heard they moved into a small suburban apartment. My father lost all his social standing and, more than anything, his pride. The supposed advisor role from his old friend never materialized, and no one contacted him again. The once imposing figure of my father no longer existed. My mother, deprived of the social stage she had once ruled, aged rapidly. With nothing left to feed her vanity, she began avoiding people and isolating herself at home. A friend of mine once saw her at a supermarket, rummaging through the discount bins. The moment my mother noticed her, she turned away in shame and fled. As for Nicole, she couldn't maintain her influencer facade. Rumor had it she became the mistress of a wealthy man somewhere. Not long after, her social media went silent. The glamorous life she dreamed of was nothing more than a hollow mirage sustained by others. Now, I'm walking a new path with Kevin. After my parents moved out, I sold the house. With the proceeds, I established a foundation, a scholarship fund to support talented young engineers from underprivileged backgrounds and women striving to build independent lives from difficult circumstances. Our home isn't a luxury house for show like my childhood house was. It's a bright, sunlit home in the suburbs, surrounded by greenery and filled with laughter. Kevin travels the world as the CEO of his company, but every weekend he comes home. We drink coffee together and tend to the herbs in our garden. That's our time. Simple, quiet, and irreplaceable. A person's worth isn't determined by their family name or their job title. It's defined by their integrity and their actions. And when you act without integrity, the consequences will always return to you. I've proven these two truths with my own life. And now, at last, I can say it with complete certainty. My life is mine.